Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. We've had somewhat of a contentious year this year. A lot of things going on with the City Hall and the library and the teacher strike. And to get us an impression of what's going on from a different point of view, invited the Doctor of Education, Matt Ferreira. Welcome, Matt. And your day job is you are the Assistant Superintendent for Financial Operations. What does that really mean?
Thanks, George, and thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. So yes, I'm Associate Superintendent for Finance and Operations at a local school district in New Hampshire. So it's School Administrative Unit 21. That probably means nothing to you. We have a unique structure. It's a kind of a cooperative district where
the towns aren't big enough to have their own school committee, so there's one school.
Yeah. Well, I will say we actually have 5 school boards and one joint board. So I would argue that you're correct, though. They shouldn't have their own school boards. But yeah, we're Hampton, Seabrook, Northampton, Hampton Falls, and Southampton.
Yeah.
So my capacity, I'm responsible for not only the budgets, but also, the business functions. So AP, payroll, human resources, transportation, technology, facilities, food service,
Chief cook and bottle washer.
all the operations for the schools. So it's unique in New Hampshire because I am presenting to not only the 5 school boards, but I'm also presenting to 5 budget committees, our various committees, and we have taxpayer groups. It's really a collaborative process. I have to work closely with the town manager and the various town departments, and we have a diverse community similar to Beverly, where there's many different ideologies and political beliefs, and you really have to work together to ensure that we educate our kids in a proper fashion. So.
But you live in Beverly.
I live in Beverly.
So you have a more than the average interest in what goes on. So basically you've commented before on the school system. What do you think we need to do for the school system? So I have 3 children in the school district. We love Beverly, and I really only want to see improvement. And it was a pretty contentious bargaining session. I lead bargaining in my school district, so I understand it can sometimes be a little contentious, but I prefer it to be a little more collaborative and work because we all have we all have the same vision and goals, and we all want ultimately the same ultimate end. So when I look at Beverly, our administrators and our teachers are doing an amazing job because they're doing more with less. They just don't have the resources necessary to provide for our students. When I look at areas of improvement, I think one area is certainly the middle school. Middle school, there's no perfect middle school. Yeah.
It's a tough age.
Yeah.
There's going to be, you look across the state, there's always going to be some challenges. That being said, we're understaffed with mental health support. We don't have the proper interventions. The class sizes are very large for those ages. We really set the middle school up for kind of a difficult challenges because it's the largest middle school in the state. We added 5th grade, where there's really no academic or social reason for that. That was really a financial decision. So some of our funding issues or deficiencies, and we'll get to that a little later, have really exasperated some inherent problems with the middle school. I see communication as an area of improvement. both our elected officials and at the top, our superintendent could do a little better job with communicating to the community and the families, and kind of letting us know what the challenges are, what we need to support our students. Oftentimes, we've been in situations where that communication is a little tone deaf. When you looked at the strike, it didn't feel real or genuine, and a little bit contentious, like forceful, right? Which wasn't, it is never
Well,
good.
The fact that the negotiation came to a strike means that obviously they're not talking to each other, they're talking past each other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, exactly. And really, we should be working as a team, as a whole community, not just the administration, the school committee, and teacher educators, but our public education is the bedrock of every community, and it affects everyone, right? And it's where our product, our students are entering our society. They'll be our employees, they'll be opening businesses, they'll be contributing to our community. I mean, people like to cite property values for good school correlated to good school districts. Of course, that's in effect, but it's really more than that. We need to provide for our students so that they can be active members of our community.
So I guess, Chris, you put up the first chart. So this sort of gives us a measure of where Beverly stands relative to the state in terms of at least MCAS, which is one of the, may not be the most accurate representation, but it's the one we use.
Yeah, data is, our assessment scores are a single data point.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell the whole picture. However, it gives a kind of a good indication of where Beverly is. This is actually shows student progress for our students in Beverly. So it's showing that we're not making progress towards improvement, right? And that's problematic. We have low test scores. I mean, 58% of our students, 3rd through 8th grade, are not at grade level proficiency for math. I'm sorry, for ELA and science. 51% of our students aren't proficient in math. That's thousands of students when you're looking at a 4,500 enrollment. So it's the core numbers are very troubling, but then this just exacerbates it because it shows we're not making that progress. We're below the state average, and Beverly shouldn't be below the state average. And when you look at all the metrics, when you look at funding, when you look at teacher retention, teacher salary, class sizes, we are consistently below state averages.
Well, Chris, the second chart, please. So this gives us a ranking of where we fit in the state. And was there about 350 school districts in the state?
Yeah, it's closer to 400.
Closer to
but I mean, to be 351st in average class size is a problem, because that means that our teachers are tasked with doing more with less. We're dealing with significant behaviors in the classroom. It's really asking a lot of our teachers to manage some of those, not just instruction, which is their core job, but they're managing behaviors, classroom management. They're dealing with all these challenges that makes it difficult to focus on the academics. We have lack of support in the schools, so that just exacerbates it. Teacher retention at 252nd in the state. That I think that's emblematic of how the teachers are feeling. They're feeling undervalued. We just passed a new contract, but they've consistently been underpaid.
Yeah.
When you look at relative to other towns, so it's very difficult to hire and to retain the good quality teachers. And then the big one, which is per pupil spending. We're 330th in the state in per pupil spending. That is a real problem. Actually, if you want to go to number 3, the third chart, that will really kind of highlight that challenge.
Yeah.
So, you look back to 2014, we were spending about roughly $1,900 less than the state average on a per pupil basis. That represents about an $8 million deficit to the state average if we were funding our schools at the state average. $8 million is a lot, but we've actually widened that gap over the years, and now we're $4,000 per student less than the state average. That represents $18 million annually. So what that does is it creates the large class sizes. We end up eliminating advanced courses on the middle and the high school. We have fewer intervention services. We have limited mental health support. We have overworked and underpaid paraprofessionals, which is a major issue. Special education is a major issue because we are legally obligated to provide services to students with disabilities, but when we don't have the funding, something has to give. So there's shortcuts. We implement programs that aren't done with fidelity because we don't have the proper staffing available.
Well, we have to ship them out of town.
And you know what? To not invest in special education is very short-sighted because that ends up costing the town or the city more in the long run. Our administrators are tasked with an impossible job, because they end up having to focus on managing more the crises rather than focusing on accountability and working with teachers and instructional practices. We just spoke about student performance. We aren't where we need to be student performance-wise, and ultimately, we shift the burden to fundraising. Right, our PTOs are incredible, but they're ending up funding core operating costs, and that's not their role. PTOs should be focused on enrichment.
What are PTOs?
So parent-teacher organization. So they fundraise for the schools. They're the ones that are funding all of our field trips. They're the ones that are, my daughter just had a squid dissection in class, and they funded that project. Well, that's a core curriculum item. That shouldn't be paid for from the PTOs. And we're starting to see programs eliminated. This year, we eliminated the third grade strings program. A few years back, we eliminated the elementary band program. We eliminated the band director a number of years back. You're seeing the librarian. We have no librarians in the elementary schools. It's really it's really a shame, and these are little one-offs because we have to make shortcuts everywhere, but it adds up in the aggregate and really affects the quality of education for our students. And what I worry about, not necessarily my children, because we're able to offer them outside resources. My kids go to tutoring. We go to museums. We go to they've seen a Broadway play. They've been in multiple countries, multiple continents. It's the vulnerable students. It's the students on the margins. It's students with disabilities. It's students that identify differently. It's students from a diverse socioeconomic or racial background that they may not even understand that they're being shortchanged, but they're being disproportionately affected, and it's a problem for our community.
So I guess one of the issues comes down to is the way the city is set up now with a strong mayor and a weak city council, and they also end up with a relatively weak school board, because way back when the school board used to set the budget for the schools, and the city had to come up with the money. Now it gets to be this exercise of a budget gets proposed by the school board to the city, and the city works it into the big budget, and the school gets told, well, this is what you're going to get, kind of thing. And hopefully that's the right answer, but apparently this time around, especially with the strike, it wasn't. And
Well,
the whole process of negotiating through that mess, it ended up in a strike.
and you hit on the crux of the problem. Like, that's not how you budget. That's not how schools should budget. You can't be given a number and say, figure it out.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable, and that's a real disservice for our students. We should be doing zero-based budgeting, determine what exactly our needs are, and how to meet our initiatives, our goals, and then to develop that budget there. Now, obviously, you're gonna have to prioritize. There's not unlimited funds.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
But you need to at least conduct that exercise to determine what is needed. And part of that is letting the community know what can't be done with this dollar amount. Like, we know, like, over the last, since 2014, we are $135 million in total under the state average in funding. Well, what does that actually mean for your students? And if the school committee and the administration actually did a real budget instead of being given a number and then just, filling in the blanks, then we as residents would understand what is being shortchanged. Now, I know, because I'm in the business, I can see it. I can identify the areas of improvement in 2 seconds. But the general community doesn't even realize that that's what's going on. And it's real. Like I said, it's a real disservice for our students and our children, and ultimately for the city of Beverly.
So really what all this comes down to is leadership from City Hall, because that's where, the rubber hits the road, the dollar does something. You come up with all sorts of euphemisms. It really comes down to City Hall. And yet the school committee is supposedly, as you point out, not only making sure that the administration of the school system is correct and proper and doing all the things they should, but letting the taxpayers know in advance, hey, we see a problem coming and we're going to have to do something about it, and brace yourself, because, hey, this is the reality.
Yeah.
And I guess what you're telling us is you don't see that happening in the city, and again, because your expertise and background, you know where to look and what pages to turn over, and oh yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
Kind of thing. And the average individual doesn't get that message. So we get down to, all right, strong mayor. What should the mayor be doing to make sure that by the time he gets an estimate from the school board as to how much they want for the coming year, he knows and the city knows what's in it and why it's in it, and what are you going to do about it?
So yeah, and that's ultimately it's the mayor's decision, and it falls on the mayor. I won't, our top leadership, superintendent, school committee, certainly have a role to play. Even city council, they should be using their influence to advocate for more funding like that. So I do not absolve those entities. That being said, when the rubber meets the road, it's the mayor's decision. And the fact remains that our current administration has only reduced funding for schools at the local level. And I hear excuses that it's state funding or the ESSER funds expiration. Well, we all knew the ESSER funds were expiring.
Yeah.
That should have been planned accordingly. And the ESSER funds, unfortunately, we appeared to use them to supplement the operating budget, as opposed to the purpose, which was to address learning loss and pandemic-related items on top of the budget.
Yeah.
We did the same thing with foundation budget, so state funding, where foundation budget levels have increased and we've decreased our local.
What's the foundation level budget?
That's the state funding that we receive
What's
on
it
a per
supposed to be
student.
spent on?
Well, it's at our discretion to use the
Okay.
foundation budget. That's just the state portion. So there's
Okay.
there's local funding, which we tax our our tax base. Then we
Yeah.
have the state funding, and then we have federal funding through grants, so IDEA, title funds. The issue with with state funding is there's very little, or there's a less proportion of state funding. So we're burdened at the local level.
Okay.
It's a regressive tax, really. So we are challenged with that because obviously people don't want to pay more in taxes.
Oh, sure.
Right? I mean that's not a winner. And the mayor, he wants to keep his job.
Yeah.
But I personally would advocate for investment in our cities. People complain about a whole host of a number of issues in the city. Well, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And when you look at our tax rate, we're about 265th in the state in residential tax rate. We're 57th in business tax rate. What does that mean? Well, we don't pay a whole lot in residential taxes. I know no one believes that.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay more in taxes.
Yeah.
But and I'm not saying that you necessarily need to make a big increase, but we shouldn't. We put ourselves in this hole. We should have incrementally been increasing our funding rates for schools, and now we're in a really tough situation where, like I said, an $18 million deficit versus the state average. Other communities are able to figure that out. So I hate it when I hear there was just an article in the paper. And not the paper, the Beverly Patch the other day, where the superintendent blamed state funding. Well, it's not a lack of state funding. Every other 329 communities spend more in local taxes or local funding than we do on schools.
Yeah.
So that's not the answer. Beverly is a well-resourced community. We have a good tax revenue base, and the mayor, has been very supportive of schools from a presence perspective. He shows up, he goes to events, he says the right things, but when it comes down to it, a budget reflects your values.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that our current administration does not value public education based on our funding levels. I don't know how the budget looks. Like I'd have to do a deep dive as far as is there efficiencies somewhere? Could we reallocate resources? I'm sure there are to a certain extent, but I would imagine it's just we don't have enough revenue when you look at it.
Yeah.
And he apparently is more interested in keeping his job than what's best for the city or best for our students. So.
Well, that gets down to, I guess, the issue of how do we make something happen? How do we do something different? And I think from my perspective, it starts with the school committee. They're in the process right now of hiring a new superintendent.
Yep.
I, for one, have not seen what the criteria is they're looking for. What do they want in a new superintendent?
Yeah, it's a little unclear. The school committee was very late in the process. I have concerns. The school committee hired the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to run that search. A basic superintendent search is it doesn't matter who does it. It's very similar.
Yeah.
I posted a basic process online for superintendent search. Anyone can really do that. Anyone can post an ad. What a search firm should be tasked with is recruiting and then vetting the candidates.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as the Massachusetts Association for School Committees, they don't do that because they can't recruit from their own membership. So that's the biggest part, is getting the right candidates.
Yeah.
And then from a vetting perspective, candidates look great on paper, but then there's red flags. It could be that they were, a position was eliminated, or it could be that they weren't going to be renominated.
Yeah.
There are candidates that apply for every administrative job in the state,
Yeah.
and there's a reason why they're not hired.
Yeah.
Where there's smoke, there's typically fire.
Yeah.
So when you hear about candidates who may have had relations with staff members, they may not have been investigated. Typically, when there's those allegations, you kind of want to stay clear of that type of thing. I'm not sure, and those are like the types of red flags. Who knows? I have my concerns about this candidate pool. I hope that we have a good candidate. We need to stay away from an internal candidate. Of the 3 candidates we have now, none are internal. I certainly would be concerned because there's no because our current administrators, they only know what they know. Yeah. They've been in Beverly their whole career. Yeah. We don't need the status quo. We need a different perspective. We need to do things differently. And that's my concern with an internal candidate, which we've done in the past, which has just perpetuated our problems, really. So we'll see how this shakes out. I'm hopeful, but I'm not terribly optimistic.
Yeah,
so.
I think one of the points you made about we're getting behind more and more as the time goes on, and it shows up like in the teacher strike where all of a sudden, wow, the teachers are way behind. Well, how did they get way behind? Well, they got behind little by little. Yep. So this is almost like a water torture game. Little by little, you get farther and farther behind. And like you mentioned earlier, well, we don't have any librarians in the elementary schools anymore. We used to be able to afford to do that.
Yep.
And I bet that if you dug into it deeper, you find out there's a lot of things we don't do anymore. And at the time, we thought all of these things were important. And I think this comes down to, the school committee making their case that, hey, we want a top-notch education system in Beverly. And whether you believe that MCAS is the magic number or what else you want to rate them by, how many kids go to college or how many kids graduate from trade school. And that's another one of my bugaboos. I don't want to start on that. But somehow or other, we've got to get the message, I guess, across to the school committee that you got to advocate for the schools. And that may be the next topic we come up with. And believe it or not, we've had our half hour of fun.
That was quick.
Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you're stirred up a little bit by this discussion. And if you got any comments, my email address is in the credits. And if you've even got a longer comment, we can make room for you here at the table. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned. It's going to be an interesting campaign season. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.